Good morning, I am Dr. Banerjee Chakka, Associate Professor of Law, National Law University and Judicial Academy, Assam, Guwahati. I am representing my organization to present today this paper on protection of victims of armed conflict and paper International Human Rights Law. My coordinator, Ms. Dr. Srinivas Burra, Assistant Professor, South Asia University. And this particular topic, which very pertinent and important during the situations of armed conflict. So now the presentation opinions which I am going to express here, it's purely mine and not of my organization. Today my presentation basically broken down into 7 aspects, that is basic outlines of modules, that is introduction, protection of the civilians, protection of women, children, protection of prisoners of war and missing people and refugees in the international armed conflict and non-international armed conflict. The law of armed conflict is generally known as international humanitarian law. This branch of international law is specifically designed to protect the victims of the armed conflict, and further it is intended to limit the use of armed violence against the people, those who are not participating in the armed conflict and those who are no longer participating in the armed conflict. And main importantly, if you see the introductory observations made by the international humanitarian law, the normative framework of international law prohibits the use of force under Article 2 Clause 4 of international law, that is the United Nations Charter. However, armed conflicts continue to happen and civilians and protected categories of the people, children, they are continued to suffer various hostilities and activities which are situated in the world at present. The fundamental objective of IHL is to protect the victims of armed conflict, and it also offers protection to the various categories of the people. This is considered as protected persons under international humanitarian law. To protect all these protected people under international law, the provisions of the 4 Geneva Conventions of International Law, that is 1949, and its additional protocol which are adopted in 1977 specifically provides various legal mechanism to protect these certain categories of the people. These categories including civilians, women, children, civilians in the territory of occupied places, and the civilians, those who are interned, civilian in wounded, sick and shipwrecked members of the armed forces, prisoners of war, refugees, displaced persons and missing persons. This is the basic idea of entire the module which today I am presenting. And now for the first thing, that is the protection of the civilians. Primarily international humanitarian law recognizes 2 categories of persons in armed conflict, combatants and civilians. Combatants have the right to participate directly in the hostilities, but whereas the civilians, they are not, and they are protected by international humanitarian law. This is the first category under protection of international law, particularly humanitarian law, for the purpose of protecting civilians during the armed conflict. Under IHL, civilians have the general right to protection against all effects of the hostilities, but cannot participate in the hostilities. If they participate in armed conflict, the protections which are provided under IHL will not be extended to them, and they will lose all the protections which are there under international humanitarian law. Civilians are defined under Article 50 Additional Protocol 1. Civilian means a person who is not a combatant, who is not a member of the armed forces, who has not taken arms spontaneously to resist an invading forces. If there is any doubt, and a person who is participating in armed conflict who is not a combatant can be treated as a civilian. It is prohibited for the civilians to participate in engage in combat operations, engage in acts harmful to the enemy such as sabotage or assisting the POWs to escape, or provide frontline support and take direct participation in the hostilities. These are the important directives given under the General Geneva Conventions of International Humanitarian Law for the civilians. And civilians may not be the object of an attack unless they are directly taking part in the hostilities. And one more important thing, civilians bear no criminal responsibility if they are not participating while spontaneously they are taking up the arms against the marauding forces, that is called levée en masse. But whereas civilians bear criminal responsibility for killing or injuring members of the armed forces or opposing forces or causing damage, destruction to the property which is protected under international law. Civilians may be tried for the breaches of international humanitarian law and other international crimes which they have committed, being not part of the armed conflict. Civilians may only be punished as a result of fair and regular trial process. If captured, they will be interned or detained as civilians, and there are certain judicial guarantees which says they must be treated humanly and they are not entitled as a prisoners of war status, which are otherwise extended to the combatants, those who are fallen in the enemy hands. Here one more important objective, we need to recognize that responsibility of the states for the protection of the citizens. The IHL, the international humanitarian law, provides certain obligations to the state parties with specific obligations, that states are always under the obligation to provide protections. Parties to the conflict may take such measures of control and security in regard to the protected person as may be necessary as result of the conflict or the war. The convention also prohibits the use of civilians as a shield to protect certain areas of installations are usually of military importance from the enemy attack. This is widely condemned in various recent attacks which have been happened in the Sri Lanka, Sierra Leone as well as Rwanda. And the collective punishment of civilians and measures aimed at intimidating, terrorizing the civilian population, pillages, hostage taking, reprisal against the civilians are forbidden. I think this is the only convention in international humanitarian law protect the terrorist activities under the international armed conflict. Terrorizing the civilian population is prohibited. Civilians under the power of enemy forces must be treated humanly in all circumstances without any adverse distinction such as race, color, sex, language, religion, belief, political or any other manner inconsistent with the objectives of international law. Civilians must be protected against all forms of violence, inhuman and degrading treatment, including murder, torture and other guarantees which are provided under the International Humanitarian Law Convention, such as Additional Protocol 1, Article 75 and Additional Protocol 2, Articles 4 and Common Article 3 of 4 Geneva Conventions. And here, as I mentioned, Article 75 of the Additional Protocol 1 and Article 4 of the Additional Protocol 2 provides an important fundamental guarantees for the protection of the civilians as well as the persons of hors de combat, that is the people those are out of the combat activities, and the civilians in the occupied territories are protected by the 4th Geneva Conventions. As I mentioned earlier, fundamental guarantees, they are equal to the fundamental guarantees provided under the human rights law mechanism such as UDHR, ICCPR, ICSR, including our Indian Constitution Part 3 of India. And next, coming to the second point, that is protection of the women in the situations of the conflict. For the protections of the women, there are various provisions given under the international humanitarian law. One important thing we need to understand, women are the most vulnerable sections of the people in the armed conflict, and there are number of the provisions under international humanitarian law provides various protections for them. Particularly general protections were given mostly in article 49 articles, and there are 19 articles which gives the special protections to the women under international humanitarian law. So women, as I said, women are the most vulnerable groups of the people during the situations of armed conflict, under the IHL provides the effective mechanisms under which the 4 Geneva Conventions and the 2 additional protocols of 1977 provides the mechanism to protect the women during the situations of armed conflict. Along with, there are number of United Nations efforts to protect the women from the sexual violence which has been happening in the recent past, particularly in the wake of the Second World War during the Nazi regime, where women have been separated from their men and from the children, and they were exterminated in the concentration camps. So due to the efforts of an international community, number of people have been prosecuted, those who have committed these heinous crimes under international humanitarian law. And after that, in 1945 and subsequently in 1948, United Nations General Assembly has taken number of resolutions to protect the sexual violence against the women during the situations of armed conflict. One which I would like to mention here, that is a Declaration on the Protection of Women and Children in Emergency of the Armed Conflict of 1974, Declaration on the Elimination of Violence Against Women in 1993, Security Council Resolution 1325, Women and Peace and Security. This is one of the important resolution of 1325 of the United Nations Security Council, which provides very comprehensive mechanism for the protection of the women during the situations of armed conflict or as well as during the peacetime. The protection of the victims of armed conflict is an important objective under IHL. So, this is the general principles of international law, which said that discriminating on the basis of sex, color, race or any other manner inconsistent with the objectives of IHL is prohibited. However, there are certain and important protections have been extended to the people, those who are not participating in the conflict, such as women. Generally, IHL do not discriminate, but however, here IHL do provide certain specific legal provisions for the protection of women. The reason is that they were the most vulnerable groups of people in the armed conflict. As I explained it to you earlier, not only from the Second World War and much before and later, whatever the conflicts are witnessed by the human community today, after the end of Cold War, number of conflicts have been solely directed against the sexual exploitations of women. The protections afforded to women by IHL is the same as the protection provided to the combatant, civilians or persons of all they combat. This is considered as the general protections under international law. Along with the general protections, there are number of protections extended by the International Humanitarian Law Conventions, that is non-discrimination on the basis of sex, human treatment of the women, protection against the effect of the hostilities, restrictions on the prohibitions on the use of specific weapons. As we can see that from the 1899 as well as 1907, the Hague regulations specifically restrict certain weapons solely directed to the civilian population. Women as a part of the civilian population, these principles generally apply, and it is considered as customary principles of international law. Along with the general protections, the Geneva Conventions and its additional protocol provides specific protections and rights for the specific needs of the women, since they have been increasingly affected by the armed conflict. As I said, particularly after the Cold War, when you see that the victims of armed conflict are civilians, whereas the traditional normative warfare which took place among the state parties, which did not affect the civilian population, but whereas the modern conflicts which are substantially affecting the rights of the people, rights of the women and the children. Hence, the specific protections are required under the humanitarian law to give the specific requirements of the women, since they have been increasingly affected by the armed conflict. Women as members of the civilian population are subjected to the various acts of violence during the situations of conflict, and they are often suffer the direct and indirect effects of the fighting, and they are invariably bear the brunt of the armed conflict, and also they bear greater responsibility for the children and their elderly relatives when the men flee from the conflict situations and leave their families and to fight or detained by the certain circumstances of the war, and also there are number of effects which affected to their men. Women will be subsequently, they will become the victims of the warfare. And also very important point to note here, the manner in which the IHL is providing, it is not specific to the general protections of international humanitarian law, but whereas it is providing very specific mechanisms in order to respect the rights of the people. However, if you see that the modern context which happened in the 1992 former Yugoslavia as well as Rwanda, which extended various problems to the victims of the armed conflict, such as women. In the Rwandan context, the minority Tutsis were exterminated by the majority Hutus, and women were subjected to the greater violence against their dignity and the other situations of the armed conflict. And here another point I would like to mention, that women are often under the direct threat from the indiscriminate attack due to the proximity of the fighting. Many women often they do not flee from the hostility, from the fighting places or where the conflicts are happening, because of their family and their family members, and they do believe that the very fact that they are women, they think that conflicting parties might spare them, but this is not proven as a mechanism and true. But whereas IHL provides along with the general protections, there are certain special protections given to the women against the armed attacks like rape, enforced prostitution or any other form of an assault under Article 27 of the 4 Geneva Conventions. If you see this particular aspect of the special protections were not provided in basis of the dignity of women, but as it is treated as the honor which has been mentioned under this particular article. If you see that in the provisions under international humanitarian law, as I mentioned earlier, there are 49 provisions, entire gamut of international humanitarian law providing protection for the victims of armed conflict, women as a protected category. But when it comes to all these 49 articles, they have been provided as a part of the civilian population or as a part of the combatant operations or as a part of the detainees, but women as a dignity, no article which specifically provides. This is one of the lacunas within the context of international humanitarian law. And there are another 19 articles which provide under international humanitarian law, which provides the women as a nursing mother or as a old age woman, and they are giving specific protections but not as a otherwise. But whereas in 1993 and 94, the special tribunals projected by the United Nations Security Council, which have established through resolutions, these particular statutes of the ICTY and ICTR try to provide some mechanism to prosecute people those who are perpetrated the violation and committed the crimes against women and sexual atrocities committed against women. This is considered as one of the landmark achievements in the discipline of international humanitarian law. Coming back to the terms which were used by the international humanitarian law, the term honor, according to the Article 27 of the 4th Geneva Convention, they try to say that the honor is very important than the dignity, but as the IHL scholars as well as most of the scholars from the international humanitarian law, they criticize this particular aspect of trying to discriminate, providing the women their protections as a part of the honor but not as a part of the dignity. Here why it is criticized? Because women honor is only attributed when they are chaste, when they have been victimized and sexually abused, they were not treated as dignified as that is a common perceptions of patriarchal societies of India and as well as international society. In this context, if you see that this provision which used the honor, which attracted much debate among the IHL scholars, because it failed to recognize the brutal and gross violations of human rights, instead of talking about the repression of these crimes, but they are talking about only honor. So that is why number of IHL scholars is criticizing the provisions of international humanitarian law. However, there are number of other mechanisms which have been provided which protects the dignity of the women other than the international humanitarian law. When we come across to that rape as a war crime has not been included under a general normative framework of international humanitarian law. But however, as I mentioned earlier, the recent past international war crime tribunals such as ICTY and ICTR recognize and made efforts to rape as a sexual violence against women is considered as a war crimes. And taking this as a lead, in 1998, the Rome Statute of International Criminal Court tried to provide some stringent mechanism and recognized sexual violence, rape, enforced prostitution and other offences against the women considered as a war crime. This is one of the stepping stone and one of the important move on the part of the international criminal law as well as international humanitarian law. In one more point we need to understand, traditionally international humanitarian law and international human rights law and other branches of international law considered as a not hard law but as considered as a soft law. But however, I have one important opinion to share with you, that is, it is one of the very effective implementing legislations which we have under the Geneva Conventions of International Law. These Geneva Conventions provide effective implementation for the protection of the women, children and other vulnerable people through their domestic mechanism by having the domestic legislations, those who are parties to the international humanitarian law conventions. Now coming to the third category of the protected persons or the victims of the armed conflict is the children. When we see that children are the most vulnerable sections of the populations and they are bearing the brunt of the armed conflict. According to the UNICEF reports which concluded that recently more than 3 lakh children all over the world under the age of 18 are used in combat operations and supportive roles as a cooks, domestic assistance in the warlords and messengers during the situations of armed conflicts like covert operations and porters by both the state and non-state armed groups. This is a very deplorable situations during the situations of armed conflict. And as per the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, it defines clearly who is the child. When the question comes in, who is the child according to the international law and domestic law? As per the provisions of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, which was adopted in 1989, which clearly says that a child means every human being below the age of 18 years, unless under the law applicable to the child who attains the age of majority earlier than that. But however, this particular provision, though it gives standing and instructions as well as obligations to the state parties, many states they did not ratify this convention, they still do keep reservations to it. However, number of principles under the international humanitarian law and human rights law provide specific legal mechanisms in preventing the use of children in armed conflicts. So, one important mechanism we need to see that is under additional protocol 1 of the Geneva Conventions of 1949, which relating to the protection of the victims of international armed conflict, that is the children. It clearly prohibits, according to the article 77 clause 2 of the additional protocol 1, provides that, I quote, the parties to the conflict shall take all feasible measures in order to protect the children, those who have not attained the age of 15 years. Do not take direct part in the hostilities, and in particular they shall refrain from recruiting them into the armed forces. This is a clear obligation on the part of the state, but when you see the ground realities as of today, they were not being followed strictly, due to which we have seen that the indictment given by the International Criminal Court, that is in Rome, for Sierra Leone, Charles Taylor was prosecuted and he has been indicted, as well as Joseph Lubanga, the recent tribunal trials which has indicted him from prosecuting and also recruiting the children in the armed conflict. In recruiting among those persons who have been not been attained the age of 15 years, whereas article 77 clause 2 imposes the obligation during the situations of international armed conflict that recruiting among those persons who have not been attained the age of 15 years, but who have not been under the age of 18 or should not take part in the conflict, but this is not been proved as a viable mechanism under international law. If you see that in further, the article 4 clause 3 and subclass C of an additional protocol 2, which provides an important mechanism and also strict instructions to the state parties as well as non-state parties during the situations of non-international armed conflict, which clearly says that children, those who have not attained the age of 15 years, shall neither be recruited in the armed forces or groups nor allowed to take part in the hostilities, particularly in the situations of non-international armed conflict. But whereas most of the non-international armed conflicts which happened particularly in our own South Asia, that is in Sri Lanka, more than 20,000 children have been recruited and forcibly indicted as a child soldiers. It is one of the gravest violations of international humanitarian law. Further, article 38 of the Convention on the Rights of the Child provides various strict legal measures and mechanisms to the state parties. If you see that important provisions under which state parties should undertake and respect to ensure the respect for the rules of IHL and applicable them in armed conflicts which are relevant to the child. If you see this particular provision, article 38 of the Child Rights Convention are complementing with international humanitarian law, that is Geneva Conventions and its protocols, for the purpose of protecting the children and not taking them as a direct part in the hostilities. State parties also should take all the feasible measures to ensure that persons, those who have not attained the age of 15 years, do not take part in the hostilities. If you see that further development which took place after all the episodes which have been happening in the world, particularly in the African continent as well as in the South Asian context, if the important major development which took place in the 1998, that adoption of the Rome Statute. This Rome Statute provides a number of crimes as gravest crimes, which is a kind of complementing the provisions of grave breaches regime of international humanitarian law. If you see that the elements of war crime which have been provided under the international criminal law, which recognizes certain offences, are one of the important crimes which can be repressed by the state parties as well as non-state parties. They mentions that according to the Article 5 Clause 1, which says that the crimes of genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes and the crimes of aggression. According to the Article 8 Clause 2 Subclause B and 25 of ICC Rome Statute, which clearly says that conscripting or enlisting children under the age of 15 years into the national armed forces or using them to participate actively in the hostilities is prohibited. All the state parties in the Rome Statute must adhere to the principles of this particular clause. And the second important clause, that is Article 8 Clause 2 Subclause E and 7, conscripting and enlisting children under the age of 15 years into the armed forces or armed rebellion groups or using them to participate actively in non-international armed conflict is prohibited. However, number of the Asian countries are not parties to this particular convention. Only Europeans and some of the African countries are parties to it. Now, there are number of criticisms also laid against the implementation of ICC Rome Statute. However, if you see that the effective implementing legislation with regard to the protection of the women and the protection of the children are concerned, Rome Statute made a considerable amount of efforts in order to repress and end the culture of immunity in international law and provide effective enforcement mechanism to it. Now, coming further with regard to the children, Article 1 of the optional protocol of the CRC, that is the Child Rights Convention, which clearly prohibits the involvement of the children in the armed conflict. This particular protocol supplements the obligations which are there under the 4 Geneva Conventions, 2 additional protocols and other human rights mechanism with regard to the protection of the children. This is one of the important development towards providing the protections to the children in international and non-international armed conflict. And Article 1 of this CRC optional protocol provides that state parties shall take all feasible measures to ensure that members of their armed forces who have not attained the age of 18 years do not take direct part in the hostilities. Here, if you see that the language of the optional protocol and subsequent provisions which are there, which talks about that direct participation of the hostilities, which is clearly mentioned that children are per se protected category from the all sorts of effects of the hostilities, but whereas the recent phenomena which adversely acting against these international law principles. Hence, these provisions are giving standing instructions as well as obligations to the state parties and non-state parties not to recruit children and make them as a direct victims of the effects of the armed conflict. Further, Article 3 Clause 1 of the Protocol to the Child Rights Convention provides that state parties shall raise the minimum age of the voluntary recruitment of persons into their national armed forces. And if you see that most of the countries, the age is below the age of 15 in some countries, in some countries below the age of 17. Including India, the armed forces recruit NDA candidate, that is National Defence Academy candidate, at the age of 16 and a half or 17. Per se, this is not violation where the CRC allows the state parties, but that is with full respect and full guarantees what have been prescribed for the state under the Child Rights Convention and the optional protocol. However, if you look into the aspects of recruitment of the children which are provided under Article 38 paragraph 3 of the Convention of the Rights of the Child, which takes that taking account of the principles contained in the article recognizes that the convention provides persons under the age of 18 years are entitled to the special protections. Special protection means children per se considered as one of the vulnerable, we need to provide special protections, and all these special protections have been provided by the international humanitarian law mechanisms. It is the only states can take sufficient measures to protect these and safeguard the rights of the children. However, some of the states are not adhering to the principles of the international humanitarian law and human rights law. Particularly, the convention relating to the child rights have not been ratified by a number of the state parties, which has to be very concerned for the most of the human rights workers, those are working in the context of the protection of the child rights. When we see that Article 3, Clause 3 of this optional protocol, which I mentioned earlier, state parties permits that voluntary recruitment in their national armed forces are permitted if the children are above the age of 15 and below the age of 18, but the state should not forget they should maintain the safeguards to ensure as minimum as possible for the people, those who have been recruiting the children as their national forces. So, one provision which says that the recruitment is genuinely voluntary basis, and also recruitment is carried out with informed consent of the persons, parents or legal guardians, and persons are fully informed of the duties involved in such military services. Persons should be reliable the proof of the age prior to the acceptance of the national military services. Article 4 further provides that armed groups that are distinct from the armed forces, such as non-state actors, they should also take these measures very stringently. Recruitment of the children in the age of 18 is generally prohibited, and the state shall take all feasible measures to prevent such recruitment use, including the adoption of the legal measures necessary to prohibit and criminalize such practices. This is one of the important mechanism which they are trying to provide under the international humanitarian law. And now further moving to the another protected category, that is the prisoners of war. The third Geneva Convention of International Humanitarian Law, it clearly provides a number of provisions, almost 130 provisions provides for the protection of the prisoners of war only. If you see that who is the prisoner of war, before going to understand the prisoner of war, we need to have clarity on the who is the combatant. Generally, combatants, those who are fighting against each other in the international armed conflict, those who are fallen in the enemy, whether they are get captured or surrendered, or granting them the status of the prisoners of war. Here, prisoners of war must be respected and protected once they are captured or surrendered. They shall be evacuated to camps situated in the area far enough from the combat zones, and they should be out of the danger. These are the obligations of the states to protect the people those who have been captured by the adverse or enemy party during the situations of the armed conflict. And further, they can be interned in those camps until the end of the conflict, unless they get seriously injured or sick, in which cases they should be repatriated with immediate effect. And they can be questioned but not bound to reveal more than their surname, first name and their rank, date of birth and army which they belong, and their regiment and personal or serial numbers. Or failing this, they should not provide, they need not provide any information. And in this context, to acquire the information or by the adverse party, they should not treat inhumanly and degradingly by these particular categories of the people. Prisoners of war shall not be prosecuted for acts committed in relation with the hostilities, except for the war crimes, because as we always say that prisoners of war is not a punishment but stopping your enemy combatant not to fight against the another enemy combatants. And further, the detaining powers shall establish a list of the prisoners of war and communicate it to the National Prisoners of War Information Bureau, which is established by the state parties during the situations of international armed conflict, or to the voluntary organization like International Committee of the Red Cross. And prisoners of war should not be repatriated earlier, and they should be released and repatriated without delay after the cessation of the active hostilities. And the requirements which we have under the third convention for the protection of the prisoners of war is that the eligibility criteria, who are eligible for the status of the prisoners of war. As I mentioned earlier, prisoners of war is not a punishment, is only detaining the combatant, those who are actively fighting against their enemy combatant. With respect to this requirement, what Geneva Conventions are mentioning that with respect to the wounded, sick or shipwrecked or combatant, the status of the combatant is only defined under the international armed conflict and does not exist in non-international armed conflict. The status of the POW is only applicable to the situations of the international armed conflict, but not non-international armed conflict. In international armed conflict, every combatant who become the hors de combat is entitled to protection as a POWs. The notion of the combatant is same as explained in the previous sections with respect to the wounded, sick, shipwrecked combatants. A combatant is considered as a hors de combat if he is in the power of an adverse party, is clearly expresses the intention to surrender, or he has been rendered unconscious or is otherwise incapacitated by wounds or sickness and therefore is incapable of defending himself, provided that in any of these cases he abstains from the hostile act and does not attempt to escape. So here one more important thing we need to see, that there is a category of the unlawful combatant. Civilians who have acted outside an organized armed forces, persons having taken direct part in the hostilities, part to the attack without distinguishing themselves from the civilians, mercenaries, spies are considered as an unlawful combatant. Unlawful combatants are not entitled to the prisoners of war status. Their only protection consists of the fundamental guarantees which are provided under Article 75 of the Additional Protocol 1. They can be tried for their actions related to the armed conflict, whilst prisoners of war cannot be sued for its participation in the hostilities unless they have committed any war crimes. In case of the doubt in the status of the combatant, of the person captured by the enemy, this person shall be benefit from the status and be treated as prisoners of war until the issue is addressed by the competent bureau and offering all the judicial guarantee provided by that. And the last section of this protected category of the people is that protection of the refugees and stateless persons under IHL. And refugees generally those who are out of combat operations due to the fear of persecution, those who crosses international border is considered as refugee people. And refugees and stateless persons are vulnerable at all times from both the state the state where they originate as well as the state those who are receiving them, and they face the brunt of various kinds of problems. Hence, the international humanitarian law provides a number of protections for the refugees and stateless persons who are vulnerable at all times. During the international armed conflicts, they shall be deemed to be protected persons within the meaning of Geneva Convention 4. And detainees is considered as a non-international armed conflict, where a persons those who take up the arms against the regular armed forces can be considered as detainees, and the fourth Geneva Convention does not provide any mechanism to it, but whereas the convention's third article, that is common to the four Geneva Conventions, which provide comprehensive mechanism for the protection of the victims of the armed conflict, that is the detainees. So these are the important mechanisms with regard to the protection of the victims of the armed conflict. In conclusion, I would like to give a little summary of on all the aspects which I have been talking. Number one, international humanitarian law provides protections to the victims of the armed conflict. The victims which I have mentioned, civilian, women, children, refugees, statelessness people, as well as shipwrecked and wounded people, gives the protections under international humanitarian law. The entire international humanitarian law provides number of protections for the purpose of giving affordable protection by the state parties. Finally, it is given as a state obligations under international humanitarian law. Humanitarian law is a part of the obligations on the states to provide protections to the victims of the armed conflict. With this, I will thank you for your kind attentions and goodbye.